Hello and welcome to Cyberside Chats. Today we're going to be talking about 23andMe, their bankruptcy, and their breaches, and we'll discuss how that's relevant to all of our organizations as well as us as individuals and our personal privacy. So let's dig in.
Yeah.
Matt, tell us what's going on.
So in 2023, just to give you guys a little bit of background, the company 23andMe suffered a pretty significant breach of their customer data. And what was kind of interesting about this was similar to like the Snowflake data breach. 23andMe wasn't actually hacked. Like their platform didn't suffer any kind of cyber attack. It's not like their internal systems were breached or something like that. They were the victim of mass credential stuffing and account reuse and account reauthorization, and they ended up losing the data, the genetic data, on about 7 million people.
That's the scary part, genetic data, because of course you can change your credit card number.
Yeah. No, your
genetic
DNA's
information, that's a little bit scary.
Yeah, your DNA, your biometrics, those are pretty much immutable. It's kind of like your social security number. I mean, you can change that with a ton of work, but like, no, I mean, if your biometric data is stolen, then it is out the door. There's not really a great way to mitigate that at this point.
Right.
And there's a lot of fear around what people could do if they got their hands on that level of genetic data.
Well, and I don't know about you, but I think about this as a security professional. Like, if it was my responsibility to be managing it, like, what do you say to people? Like, I'm sorry, okay, cat's out of the bag. And what's helpful is that this has happened before. I think often actually about Flyclear. In fact, I've been making fun of you for signing up for Clear because I'm like, remember Flyclear from 2008?
Yeah, but I get through the airport so fast.
I know,
now.
it's worth it, right? Like, who needs privacy? But if you recall, when Flyclear was first set up in 2008, they did iris scanning, they did facial recognition, and then they lost a laptop. And of course, they report this. The public is totally freaked out. And it wasn't even that many people. Like with
30,000
with
or something like
23andMe,
that.
it was like 6.9 million people's genetic information. With Flyclear, it was like a paltry 33,000, something like that.
Didn't the laptop they lost just kind of like miraculously show back up?
It showed back up. Yeah, no problem. It was just gone for a week. No big deal, right?
No big
we
deal.
found
It's
it
fine.
again. All good, everybody. You know, but even if that wasn't a breach, and I'm still not quite sure, the issue was that in the image, in their public image was damaged.
Oh yeah.
You know, people just stopped trusting Flyclear at that point. And we're concerned about their information. So,
well, I mean, that's really similar to what happened with 23andMe.
I know. It's like history repeating itself.
Yeah, they lost all of this data. People lost trust in them. There was a declining interest in their product. And then they settled a $30 million class action lawsuit to do with the potential damage coming from the loss of their genetic data.
So you came back 15 years later and bought Clear. Are you going to come back 15 years later and buy 23andMe?
I mean, no. I didn't buy 23andMe the first
maybe
time.
History okay. So maybe history won't fully repeat itself.
Maybe not, but I mean, we'll see what happens with Clear. A lot of people use it, though.
But what was interesting was, in 2009, Flyclear goes up for sale.
Yeah.
And at that time, a judge came out and said, anybody who buys this needs to respect the privacy agreements that were already in place with those losers. Those users. Excuse me.
Wow.
Well, all our stuff was lost, so I guess it was really the company that was the loser.
Good save.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But so we're seeing that today, right, as well?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Well, so there's a little bit of ambiguity about like what's going to happen with the data from 23andMe.
Right.
It's kind of like back in like 2020 when Blackstone bought Ancestry.com.
Right.
There was a lot of speculation about what Blackstone, because they're a huge investment group and they're going to want to monetize everything they can about that company, what they're going to do with that level of genetic data. Because again, I mean, there's a ton you could do with it. There's medical research you could do with it. There's the potential for selling it to data brokers.
Health.
There's a lot.
Health information mining.
Interestingly enough, because companies like Ancestry and 23andMe are direct-to-consumer products and not healthcare companies, despite the fact that they have data that could be considered health information, it's not covered under HIPAA, so those rules don't apply here.
Well, it's interesting that the FTC now has come out. It's not a judge. The FTC is coming out and saying, hey, we've got our eye on you, 23andMe, and whoever buys this needs to respect the privacy agreement. So we're seeing that again, history repeating itself again. With Ancestry.com, I know that the Blackstone Group and Ancestry came out with statements that said Ancestry is fully respecting its privacy policies. So this is a theme. And the problem with it being a theme is it's not a guarantee. We don't know what's going to happen with companies in the future. It also, I'm curious to pick your brain about this, it also makes me wonder about mergers and acquisitions in general, because depending on the type of data you have, I would be concerned about the sale of a company potentially being restricted in some way, in ways that we may not fully understand. So I think the lack of clarity really cuts both ways.
I agree with you on that. I mean, there's a lot of ambiguity about what happens with data when it's sold, or when a company
highly sensitive
highly sensitive data. When a company with highly sensitive data is sold, what happens to that data? I understand the public statements that have been made about this, but at the same time, I mean, there are other issues that we need to think about here. And one that you brought up when we were talking the other day about this was 23andMe is in distress right now.
Distressed companies.
They are in a perfect position for someone to actually break in and steal that data at this point because they're laying off staff. I'm sure there's a lot of anxiety about what's going to be happening with the company, so people may not be fully paying attention. People may just be being lazy about their work.
This month, and the CEO has stepped down. And we know that when an organization goes through turmoil, there is a risk. Security problems are fundamentally organizational issues, people issues, budget issues. And really just how we stay organized and make sure that the patches are applied and the accounts are disabled and things like that. And I fully agree with that. Like, I think there's definitely an increased risk anytime a company is in distress. Would we even know if they were hacked again? Are they watching?
That's a good question.
Who knows?
And this leads to a bigger conversation about third-party vendors in general. I mean, if you're going to be trusting your data from a business standpoint or from a personal standpoint, and that company goes out of business, what happens to the data that you gave them? Does it sit idle in an S3 bucket for all of eternity? Does it get sold off to someone else? Like, I mean, there's a lot to it.
I didn't think about that. We have that abandoned S3 bucket that we talked about a few weeks ago. And what better way to abandon an S3 bucket than to go out of business?
Right.
I mean, does anybody even check when companies go bankrupt, like all the different places their data might live? That's a little scary when you think about it.
Yeah, not a great thing.
Yeah. Well, okay, why don't we talk a little bit about what happens when data is lost? Because I think we're really coming to the point where, I don't know about you, I assume if I give a third party my data, it might go out the door sooner or later.
There's been enough examples of that lately that I think that's a real threat at this point.
And I think we need to plan for it, as you said, both as corporations and as individuals. I thought about signing up for 23andMe, and I didn't. But when I signed, I don't know if I told you at the time, I actually went and I was like, I'm going to make this totally private. I'm going to get a gift card and a fake email address and sign up for it with my, keep it completely anonymous. And then I got the little thing in the mail, and I was like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
And I feel pretty good about that decision right now.
Yeah, I think you probably should feel pretty good about that now.
But, if you're not comfortable with your data getting hacked, then really think about giving it, do I want it to be out there in the hands of a third party? Because, it happens.
Well, again, for a more enterprise example, I mean, just look at Snowflake. I mean, Snowflake was a gigantic data breach, and it happened for roughly the same reason that 23andMe happened.
The credential stuffing.
Yeah, it was just credential stuffing and account reuse and bad passwords and no MFA and things like that, things that we hammer on in cybersecurity constantly. But that was another instance of a company being given a huge amount of third-party data and then failing to protect it by not enabling just basic security safeguards. Again, they weren't hacked, but because they didn't require those security safeguards, it allowed somebody to come in and steal all of that information.
I think the parallel with Snowflake is really interesting. And the difference is that 23andMe is out of business. And Snowflake is not.
They are not.
I actually bought stock in Snowflake when they had their data breach. I've been doing this habitually. Like, if there's a big data breach, but I think the company's going to bounce back, like, boom, I buy stock. And it's usually a really good move.
Smart.
But with 23andMe, I do not buy stock. And what's the difference there?
23andMe is more of they're a direct-to-consumer organization. They're not someone who's servicing enterprise businesses or someone like that. They're on a customer model. And when their reputation gets damaged to this level anyway, and people just stop buying their service, that tanks a company pretty quickly.
I think they also had business problems before this too. So this was kind of a nail in the coffin, really.
Yeah, and I mean, similar to Ancestry, they've been through mergers and acquisitions, and they've been bought out by hedge funds before, and I mean, there's a lot of turmoil there.
But you make a good point about incident response. If it's B2B, you're saying you don't think that the PR is as bad. I mean, I think that the tech folks who were reading about the Snowflake incident realized that this was not a hack of their platform.
Yeah.
That this was customer accounts getting hacked. Not to make excuses, but this is actually a new development that a company has really been held accountable for this.
True.
And you're right, with 23andMe, the public just sees, oh, they've been hacked, and isn't really thinking about the nuances because they're business to consumer.
Well, and there's a lot less knowledge about, so for Snowflake as an example, there's a lot less knowledge publicly about who they even are or what they do.
That's true too.
And the services they offer are geared towards large enterprise businesses.
Yeah.
That's a valuable service that they have. So yeah, 23andMe is more like a find my family tree kind of a thing, which people can usually go without.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, to wrap up, let's talk about key takeaways, particularly for those of you who are in leadership positions or who are responsible for some aspects of information security. So I'm going to throw out my number one, which is know what data you have. Hopefully no one's like, oopsie, I have genetic information, but you should really understand exactly what you have, exactly where it lives, so that if there's a problem, you know who to notify, you know what you have, and you know how it can be handled. Or if you're going through a merger and acquisition or things like that, you can have conversations early to help understand what you can sell, what you can't sell, and what the terms will be.
Right.
So know your data.
Know your data. Know your contract with your vendor too. What are they going to do with your data if they go out of business? Or what do they do with your data while it's in storage? Is it encrypted? We'll talk about encryption here in a second, but is it safe basically? And what kind of safeguards do they put in place for their platform in general to make sure that your data can't be accessed without authorization?
So your number two is contractual relationships with vendors.
Yeah, do this proactively.
Okay, yeah. So if you're storing information with a third-party vendor, whether you're a corporation or individual, we've got to really understand that.
Read the end user license agreement. I know people hate doing that, but if you looked at 23andMe's, theirs was pretty onerous when it came down to their privacy policy in the end and what happened if they went bankrupt. They specifically said in their privacy policy that there was nothing stopping them from selling your data to a third party if you didn't opt out of that, which about 80% of people opted into it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow that up with third-party risk management. And I think you make a really good point. Often when we're reviewing third-party vendors, we don't think about what happens if they go bankrupt, what happens to my data, what happens if their policies change.
Right.
And that really gets to the heart of why we need to check on third-party vendors regularly, like on an annual basis, and not just like, boom, okay, we vetted them and now we're done forever. So third-party risk management, doing that on an ongoing basis is the way to go.
Well, I know you want to talk about number 4, so I'll leave
you want to talk about number 4.
Okay, let's talk about number 4. Let's talk about data encryption. Do you have the ability to guarantee that your data is encrypted while it's being stored by a third party? Because if it's not, if anyone who can access that platform, move it as an example, is able to access your data, then that can lead to something like, well, again, a massive breach of your data.
Yep. Strong encryption is key, and we've had some conversations about that recently here on Cyberside Chats. Okay, finally, plan for losses. I don't know about you, I'm getting to the point where I don't trust anybody. I just plan on if I give information to a third-party vendor, there is a risk that it might get out there. And you can help to reduce the risk of harm and damage by proactively having conversations about incident response with your key third-party vendors, for example, and just understanding what your plan is if that information gets leaked, or if there's even a risk, like a laptop goes missing for a week and then shows back up.
I really like that one, actually. There's been a couple instances lately where we've been brought in on someone else's tabletop exercise to act as one of the vendors, and just to see how vendors would interact with each other in case of a data security incident. It's actually a lot of fun to do. Yeah. Speaking of tabletops, we will be at RSA. We are running a tabletop exercise. So if you're going to be there, drop us a line, sign up for a tabletop. I know it tends to sell out pretty quickly or fill up. So make sure you sign up in advance if you want to come and join us for that. And with that, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's Cyberside Chats. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.